Today we have Adam Stone. He's the Vice President of Service Delivery and Chief Privacy Officer from TrustMAPP. He is out of Minneapolis. He has 35 years of business leadership experience with 23 plus years leading data privacy and security functions for healthcare, insurance, financial services, software marketing organizations. In his current role, Adam is a key member of the executive team helping ensure the success of customers who leverage TrustMAPP to improve the effectiveness of controls and processes in support of information security. Among his other duties, Adam serves as a fractional CISO and Chief Privacy Officer for a portfolio of financial services and manufacturer and insurance companies. Today, he's going to be speaking on using the right metrics to communicate the business value of your information security program. So everyone, let's welcome Adam.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank Kim and team for this wonderful event and the fantastic lunch as well. I was able to get a little bit of lunch before we started, so I thank the college for a wonderful lunch as well. My name is Adam Stone, and hopefully you can all hear me. And I hate podiums, and so I'm going to stand next to the podium. Let's get started right off the bat here. First off, just a disclaimer, the stuff I say is the stuff I say. It is not legal advice, and please don't take it as legal advice. Moving on from that, I thank Kim for the bio. Very, very quickly, there's a picture of me looking smug as ever, and as Kim said, I have a good amount of experience, and currently I work for a software company that produces a product called TrustMAPP, and as Kim mentioned, I am on the management team and have quite a bit of experience in that area, as well as in consulting and basic leadership as a security leader and a privacy leader, and sometimes both. Anywho, let's talk today three basic topics that I'd like to cover. And before we get started, I would like to articulate sort of what my understanding of business context and its role in communicating using metrics well to communicate to the folks that matter. We'll move on then to the actual communications, and then my hope is that we'll be able to tie it all together at the end in a nice bow. With that stated, let us first talk about business context, and I would like to set the stage by offering a thesis for today. Before I get to that thesis, I would like to mention these are my observations. Being in this business for a long time, these are the observations that I've gained. First off, cybersecurity leaders seek meaningful ways to measure the goodness of their information security programs or the performance of their security programs. Corporate executives want to hear that information, but we have had some trouble collectively communicating with the executive team, which we'll get into in a little bit. Many cybersecurity leaders, and perhaps you, have trouble articulating using what we call the right metrics for communicating the performance of the business value of the information security function. And at the end of the day, what the net effect is that corporate executives don't exactly know how to take the messages that we are providing to them. They hear what they hear, and sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. But an overriding observation that I've had in the many years that I've been doing this is that cybersecurity leaders continue to struggle to identify, measure, prioritize, and communicate the business value of the information security or the cybersecurity function. So that is my thesis today, and I will try to stick to that thesis as we go along. So, a lot of what we do in information security is part of the way that the organization views us or perceives us is it has an important role to play in how we are ultimately treated as security leaders within our organization. So, as I see it, there are two basic types of security leaders. There is a security leader that is perceived as the Department of No, as the organization that the regular folks, the civilians, hesitate to go to because they won't like the answer that they get. And ultimately, the cybersecurity leader in this sort of organization is perceived as a business hindrance. Whereas an information security leader who is perceived as a business enabler, of course, is going to be respected more and have better communications with peers and the executives. That person is going to be opportunity seeking. And last but not least, the people that count, the executives, the board members, they will have more confidence in your message, more confidence in your message. So first off, I want to show a little bit of data, and this information comes from a survey that was done, I believe, around 2015, and I believe this is this is Deloitte that said it. And basically, during this survey, they asked CISOs how they want to be perceived, what their aspirations are, and they broke these aspirations up into basically four areas here, four common areas. Now, what it doesn't show, and darn it, I just realized it doesn't show that. On the top, these four areas range from a visionary or a strategist to a technologist. And so on the left-hand side, the bar that's the longest is the perception of the security leader as that technologist, and least as the strategist. That's what this data shows, and I apologize that I don't have the labels there. Now, we asked the CISOs, or they asked the CISOs, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the CISOs said quite often, I want to be perceived as this visionary, as this strategist. And I want to be perceived less as that technologist, which is on there. So that's great. I think collectively, information security leaders want to be taken seriously. They want to have they want to be perceived as somebody who can think and can articulate strategically, and not necessarily get mired in the mucky-muck, as it were, of information security. Here's what happens oftentimes, and I've observed this, perhaps you've observed this as well. The information security leader has an opportunity to speak to the executive team or to speak to the board or both. So the cybersecurity leader comes in and starts talking in techie talk, gobbledygook. Starts providing or sharing metrics that are techie metrics, gobbledygook. And I don't know about you, but I don't know many CEOs and CFOs and other executives that are well versed in security. And so what happens is that executive team doesn't get the message for whatever reason. And the security leader comes out and is wondering why he or she is not being perceived the way he or she would like to be perceived. That's because we speak a different language, don't we? We heard all sorts of people this morning talking about various security topics. These security topics, we would never broach these topics with our executives, with our senior most executives. They're way too in the mucky-muck, as it were. We speak a different language, yet the information security leaders, that's part of your job, is to actually translate that techie stuff into actual business terms so that everyday people can understand what the heck it is you're saying. So here's another labelless graphic here. And, geez, I apologize for this. Basically, what this graphic or pie chart shows here is this survey asked corporate executives, how would you like to be informed about cybersecurity issues for the company? And basically, those two big parts of that pie are strategic in nature. One of them, the smaller one, I believe, is we want to hear about risk. And the bigger one is we want to hear about strategy and how the information security function is helping enable the business, adding value to the business. But there's a problem. Again, when we talk to these lay people, executives, board members, even our colleagues, what happens, and this, by the way, comes from some excellent work done by the National Association of Corporate Directors, which is NACD. And if you've never heard of NACD, they have been focusing on, among other things, on this cybersecurity issue for a long time. They really lead the way. Now, what I gleaned from a report is this very powerful statement. Whenever cybersecurity is raised, there is a technical devolution. A technical devolution. Wow, that really sucks. As an information security leader, we do not want to be accused of engaging in a conversation that is devolving as we speak because it's too technical. Another labelless graphic here. The question is to senior executives, how confident are you in the security leader and in the security program? And the biggest piece of the pie, as one might expect, is not very confident. Not very confident. That is a drag. We do not want to be accused of entering into conversations where our credibility is being hammered because we are in a technical devolution. We are talking techie talk to people who don't want to hear techie talk. So that really leaves us with a conundrum. And the conundrum is, well, okay, if we can't talk technical talk, what ought we talk about? And there's lots of ways to approach that. We usually use metrics of some sort. In fact, we're very good at collecting metrics of all sorts. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So with that, that's kind of setting the stage. Moving on, the first thing that we need to ask ourselves as security leaders is what purpose do we have in the organization? What purpose do we serve in the organization? Oftentimes what I will hear folks say is, well, I'm an insurance policy. Or I'm here to make sure that no bad things happen, or something like that. That's great and all. But what do the executives want to hear? The executives want to hear how you've helped help the company make money or save money. That's it, period, bottom line. You exist in the organization to help the organization make money or save money. And if you can't draw a straight line to your activities and that ability to make money or save money, or if you're lucky, both, that's going to be a problem. You're going to lose the executives. So first off, we understand that the security leader needs to operate as a bridge between the technical and the non-technical. And that's inherent. We understand that. There are different messages that we will provide to folks based on the audience that we are serving. We could talk about controls. We could focus on those in our conversations. We could focus on process. Or we could focus on strategy. And obviously, different audiences mean different messages that are coming from the security leader. So let's think about some of the ways that we can both measure and communicate the business value of the information security function. So the first one's pretty simple. Do it by compliance. We got this or that law, this or that regulation that we need to comply with. And so we measure ourselves by basically asking the question, are we compliant with this or that thing, whatever the requirement is? And the answer is binary. It's either yeah or no, we're not doing it. Maybe there is a little bit of an in-between, but basically it's a binary equation. And the benefits of using compliance as a metric to communicate with executives is that it's pretty easy to quantify. We understand it. The executives understand regulation, obviously. And it gets into the weeds in certain areas. Now, the downside to that is that when we have a compliance sort of message, that runs counter to the instincts of many executives. What do I mean by that? Well, executives are endlessly optimistic. They see opportunity everywhere. So we should too, but we don't as security leaders. In fact, what we see when opportunity springs, we say, oh boy, I better do something about that. I better put some control in place. Again, that message or the department of no. Also, compliance is not going to get to the root of problems. And we know that. Compliance is not going to flush out root causes. And last but not least, as we know, if we say, yep, we're compliant. How are we compliant on HIPAA? Oh, yeah, we're compliant. Great. We don't have to do anything more. We're good. That is a false sense of confidence. And we don't want to be accused of instilling a false sense of confidence in our executives. So compliance, it's an option, perhaps not the best option for communicating the performance of the information security function, or better yet, communicating how the information security function adds value by making money or saving money for the organization. So we got option two. Option two, we're very familiar with. We've been in the security world. Our entire world revolves around risk. We're used to that. We do it all the time. And so oftentimes we will take risk and use that as the message, use that as the key indicator for the performance of our information security function. And because it's deeply ingrained in our industry, and because it helps us organize and prioritize areas of concern, we tend to gravitate towards risk. That's a pretty normal thing. However, I will argue that risk is an inherently negative subject. Are you with me on that? Risk is an inherently negative subject. When we start talking about risk, we're talking about how all the bad things can happen to us. And I, the security leader, am going to try to make those bad things a little less bad. That's my job. The problem is when you're speaking with executive teams who are, of course, endlessly optimistic, they want to see opportunity around every curve. That kind of goes against that opportunity message. It also tends to signal that notion of, well, I'm an insurance policy. That's what I'm here. And I hear far too many people say that. Oh yeah, I'm an insurance policy. Not very sexy. And I'll tell you, the executives don't find it that sexy either. So there's another way. I don't recommend this technique, but you can do it. It's ad hoc. You basically grab any old metrics and you provide those with the executive team. You don't have to do much. That's great. It's easy. But the problem is, of course, all of the things that we would expect it to be if we are just grabbing ad hoc metrics to communicate our message of business value. So there is a fourth option, and there may be others, but I stopped at this. And this is to consider a relatively new metric, a metric called maturity. Now, many of you in the room, I'm sure, are familiar with a work that came out of Carnegie Mellon many, many years ago called the CMMI, the Capability Maturity something something. And that model is fantastic. Even though that original model was geared towards software development, that model is incredibly durable. It can be used to measure oneself regardless of the business function that you serve, including maturity, where basically the levels are least mature to most mature and the gradients in between. Now, the reason why I believe that this is a better metric to communicate with the executives is that now is where you start speaking in business terms. Because maturity, unlike risk, maturity is asking the question, what is the quality of those processes in support of the information security function? What is the effectiveness of those processes in support of the information security function? That's an entirely different conversation than, well, this or that thing is risky and I'm going to do this. I need $1 million to make that risk a little less severe. Another thing that maturity does is it enables you to very clearly align the stuff that you're doing to business objectives. Again, as an information security leader, our goal is to be able to draw a straight line between the stuff that we do and making money or saving money for the organization. Now, the challenges of maturity. For one, it's newish. You have likely been approached by vendors who have used that word to sell their products, and that's fine. There's a lot of people using the word. So it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. One of the problems with measuring by maturity is that you're not going to get into the weeds because you're focusing at a process level instead of at a controls level. You're again asking yourself the question, what's the quality of those processes in support of the information security function? And of course, when we're talking about processes, we're talking about people, places, and things. So the whole suite of elements that are necessary to make a process a well-running one. Maturity may not satisfy legislative or regulatory demands, and that's fine. Last but not least, it may be poorly understood by the folks who I am recommending need to adopt this or ought to at least consider adopting this technique when communicating with the executive team. It's not well known. I get it. Let's try to set a baseline around maturity, first off. And I've been asking myself this question for a long time. What exactly is maturity relative to the information security function? Well, I came up with an answer, which I'll show you in just a moment. There is no commonly accepted understanding of maturity. We have common understandings of risk. We have risk management methodologies that are well defined. But we don't have similar methodologies for measuring maturity. Another thing that I've seen is that maturity sometimes is blended in with the word risk. Risk and maturity are synonymous, I hear from some folks. And I would argue, no, that's not the case. Risk is related to maturity in that, generally speaking, the higher maturity an organization is, the lower the risk is, and vice versa. So there is a correlation between risk and maturity, but they're not one and the same. And the scales that we use for measuring maturity. I just mentioned the CMMI scale, which is a 1 through 5 scale. Why not 1 through 10? Why not 0 through 5 or something different? And I don't have an answer to that. There's no perfect measurement scale out there. It would be nice to come to a consensus about this. In fact, I would recommend to this group, and in fact, I recommend to every group that I talk to about this, that we get together as a group and try to find a common understanding of what this term maturity is and try to enshrine it in some form of a standard. One organization that I really respect, and I heard it mentioned when we talked about Deming this morning and the whole quality initiative. The organization in the United States that is really behind this whole quality initiative is an organization called the Baldrige organization. Anybody heard of Baldrige? Sometimes you might hear it on a car commercial where Toyota will say, "Yeah, we won the Baldrige Award for quality in the last, 3 years," or something like that, and that's great. Now, what you probably didn't know is that Baldrige also looks at quality from other perspectives, not just from a manufacturing perspective. And they put out, about 4 years ago, they put out this fantastic guide that absolutely nobody has read, which is really, really tragic. It's called the CyberSecurity Excellence Builder. Now, the Baldrige organization is a subunit of NIST, of the NIST organization. I'm sure you're all familiar with NIST. Baldrige and NIST are both creatures of the Department of Commerce, and that makes sense. Now, I found what I believe to be an excellent definition for maturity hidden in the Baldrige Cybersecurity Excellence Framework. And here is the definition that I like. Cybersecurity-focused process maturity signifies an integrated approach to organizational performance management that results in delivery of ever-improving value to customers and stakeholders, and contributing to the overall success of the organization. It improves the effectiveness of the organization's process, or in this case, the Information Security Department's processes. And it's a continuously learning mode, so that as you make mistakes, you learn from them, you get better, and you go round and round in circles. I happen to think that this makes an excellent definition of maturity relative to cybersecurity. And if you have not seen the Baldrige Cybersecurity Excellence Builder, I encourage you strongly to take a look at that thing. I think that you would be quite impressed at what you see. It approaches security, the topic of security, in a way that you may have never seen before, because it focuses on the fact that security is in place to help the business make money or save money. That's different than many of the other frameworks that we are used to seeing and using. So I think inherently we can understand features of high and low maturity. But just to suss these out here, obviously a higher maturity cybersecurity function is going to be more proactive. It's going to have metrics that are meaningful, not just metrics, but metrics that are meaningful. Efficiency and repeatability. These are all basic things that make up what would be considered a mature cybersecurity function. And of course, a less mature cybersecurity function are the opposite of these things. They're more reactive, constantly putting out fires. Obviously ad hoc, not very efficient, and nothing's written down, so things can't be repeated, at least well, because you've got all that native knowledge that isn't broadly shared. We already have a number of organizations using maturity as some form of metric. We can see here on these boxes we have organizations such as, and let me get my glasses. We have organizations in the blue area, which, OPM3, P3M3, all these wonderful acronyms. They use maturity in some form or fashion. Then we've got organizations that may be a little more familiar to us, like FFIC. If you are in the financial services sector, FFIC has a product called the CyberSecurity Assessment Tool, or the NIST FFIC CAT is what they call it. And within that tool, there is a maturity measurement. There's a technique for measuring one's maturity. COBIT talks about maturity. In fact, that's in part, that's sort of where we got the initial idea for this, was from COBIT 4.1, so a couple versions ago. And then, of course, Baldrige. And there's a lot of cybersecurity solutions out there where you might hear folks use the word maturity in trying to sell that product or to try to demonstrate some feature of the product. And they say, we're going to show you the maturity of your blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's cool. The problem is that they may say one thing, the next group says another thing, the next group says another thing. Again, we lack that sort of common understanding of what the heck maturity means. We can leverage cybersecurity maturity to our advantage, however. First off, the way we can is to, again, recognize that maturity is best measured when we look at process. If we get down to the control level, as we're measuring, we start to get into perhaps the weeds a bit. Not to say that you cannot measure the maturity of this or that cybersecurity control, but it tends to, the message seems to be a little bit more consolidated and a little bit more understandable if we condense it into the process level. And one way there's lots of ways to measure maturity. One way is to consider an element of information security against so-called attributes. So one way to measure the security, let's take a sub-function within the security department. Let's say we've got a group that is responsible for provisioning and access management within our group. And we ask the question, what is the quality of those processes in support, those access management processes in support of the information security function? We can measure that quality by considering various management attributes. So for instance, we can ask the question, how aware is the executive team of the business value of this sub-function, the access management function, such that they're willing to give you money and their visible support? What sort of policies do you have in place? Not do you have policies, but what is the quality of those policies? Are they read by anybody? Do you keep them up to date? Are they visually appealing? We can ask about technology, but instead of saying, do you have this or that tool in place, we can say, how well are you using that tool? How well are you using it? What is the quality of your processes as you use this or that tool? And it goes on. We can use different dimensions or attributes like that to measure cybersecurity maturity. In fact, I believe COBIT 4.1 uses 6 attributes, including the ones that I just mentioned. And yes, maturity, if you need, I understand. Lots of us are being asked by our executive teams to communicate messages of risk. And I understand that. And I'm not saying, I'm not arguing, I'm not even suggesting that you stop doing that, because there is an important place for those risk discussions. But there's also an important place to show the business value of the cybersecurity function, or demonstrate that business value to the executives. And you can still use maturity with that. Again, using that correlation that I just provided to you, in that, generally speaking, the more mature an organization is, the less risk we have to deal with, and vice versa. Now, there are lots of different ways to measure ourselves, identify the performance of our information security or cybersecurity programs. We can, I created this little table here. It helps me kind of understand both not only the technique itself, but what we're really trying to get at and what sort of goals we have. And so we start with the controls assessment, or an audit. And we understand that the objective of conducting an audit, a cybersecurity audit, is to comply with certain reporting requirements. Okay. We can use a compliance assessment. We talked about that before. Obviously, the objective there is to understand where you are relative to this or that regulation or this or that statute, or both. You can conduct a risk assessment. We understand that inherently. Or you can conduct a maturity assessment. And again, the objective of using maturity as a metric to express the value of the information security function is to hold the executive's attention, to get them to rise up and say, hot darn, I'm going to give you some money. I'm going to give you visible support because you have inspired us, the executive team, to understand that the information security function is here to help us make money or save money. And that makes me feel good as an executive. So tying it all together, you'll recall that my thesis is that we could use a better way to communicate the business value of the information security function to the folks that matter. Those folks that have the power to give us the money, those folks that have the power to give us the time, those folks that have the power to fire us when they lose their confidence in us. So to tie it all together, we know that cybersecurity leaders are constantly out there looking for better ways to communicate the value of their programs. And I'm here to argue that maturity may be that opportunity for you. Traditional cybersecurity metrics, they fail at times. They fail because perhaps we're not saying the right thing to the right audience, or because the audience is frankly just it's going way over their head. We're not getting the message across. Therefore, maturity, in our view, as a metric, as a unique metric, offers us a way for identifying, measuring, and ultimately communicating the business value of the information security function or the cybersecurity function. And that, my friends, is all I got to say to you today. Now, with that, notice here's an example of a scale, a measurement scale. This measurement scale goes from 0 to 5. And you can see here how we have, well, first off, for those of you who are familiar with the CMMI model, you'll see a lot of similarities there. For those who are not, you can see how we express maturity at different levels. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention today. What questions do you have?
Adam, we have some virtual questions.
Oh, yeah, please.
I will display these on screen. There you go.
Oh, there's the question. Oh, okay. Is there a KPI of proper confidence with cybersecurity in a comparison with the incorrect KPI set? Ooh. Proper confidence. Is maturity synonymous with confidence? Not certain, no. Might maturity lead to a more confidence or higher confidence? I would argue, probably. With that, I'll tell you, that's the answer I want to give to that question. I think that when we're talking about confidence, it's confidence in the security leader, confidence in the program that you're seeking. And I'm arguing that maturity could help improve that confidence. And I hope that answers this person's question. Any other questions? The standard of care for cybersecurity. And I like Guillermo's question. And for those of you who keep up with regulation and some of the things happening in the world of law, and it's the way it touches the cybersecurity function, we are seeing a lot more discussion about this notion of standard of care or duty of care. And what is duty of care? Would anybody like to offer a short description of what duty of care means? We have a taker in the very back.
I think it's similar to the fiduciary responsibility of financials. You have a legitimate, ethical, and potentially illegal obligation to take the care that's required to meet the baseline of your obligation.
Thank you. That's perfect. Duty of care is very much what it sounds like. We've got a duty to do things a certain way with respect to security. Now, of course, the interpretation of that is where we start to get into the arguments and the court cases. But this notion of duty of care, I think, and the awareness that we have of duty of care, I think comes along with maturity. In other words, the more mature we are as an information security leader, as we are an information security function, I think the better we can internalize this notion of duty of care. So that's the answer I have for that. Any other questions? Any other questions from the group? Yes, sir. We have Phil Donahue is coming, and there he is. He's even running like Phil Donahue. For those of you who are too young, I get it. It's a yes, sir.
It's still not very clear to me how maturity kind of shows the business value. Is the idea that more mature you are, more business value you bring, but how do you kind of prove that out? Like, are there any hard numbers or something behind it that we need to make sure we measure and report on? Because just because I'm highly matured, okay, what value am I adding? How do I answer that question?
I apologize. Could you repeat the question one more time a little bit louder for me?
Yeah, so how does maturity show the business value? Is the idea that highly mature you are, more business value you are providing? What's the evidence, like any hard numbers, any other metrics behind that?
That's a great question. Okay, thank you very much. How does maturity? Let's take that. I gave that fictional provisioning function. Many of us cybersecurity leaders, we might have a small department who's responsible for granting access and terminating access to people on systems. Okay, so we apply maturity to that sub-function, and we ask ourselves, what is the quality? Now, at the end of the day, we learned that the organization, as a result of tweaking a few processes after evaluating ourselves from a maturity standpoint, we tweak a few processes, and now the amount of time that an average user has to wait to get access to his or her computer when they first started the company is now compressed. It went from a day and a half, and now, because we've improved our processes, it's now 6 hours. Later. So in other words, we are improving productivity by getting people on their computers faster. So it goes beyond the security part, doesn't it? Because we got to do access and do all the right things about granting access. But that role, I would argue, in fact, the information security role in general is a service function. You're there to provide a service. And we have to ask ourselves, do I provide an okay service? How's my service quality? Do my customers think that I provide decent service quality? Those are all questions that would hopefully bubble to the top in a maturity when we think of our processes using maturity as an indicator. I hope that is a salient enough example for you. Any other questions or comments? Well, with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and thanks to FutureCon for having me. And with that, have a lovely rest of the conference. Thank you.